education. You're trying to give the young people something that will help them. Yet you don't know exactly what it ought to be.
Welcome to the Teach Thought Podcast. Terry, introduce yourself.
My name is Terry Ike. I'm a former classroom teacher and now director at Teach Thought, which means I do a lot of different things very badly.
And I'm Drew Perkins. I'm the Director of Professional Development here at Teach Thought, and hopefully that means I do a lot of different things really well.
And together we're hosting a podcast, which hopefully makes Teach Thought more accessible to you in more places, right, Drew?
Well, hopefully, yeah, but mostly it's just me hosting it because you just add episodes every so often, right?
Well, you know, I've got things to do. Remember, I'm director.
That's true.
Today's episode is sponsored by mycreationcrate.com. Everyone, I am super excited to introduce you to a new STEM education curriculum called Creation Crate. If you go to www.mycreationcrate.com, you can see how to use Creation Crate projects to teach a new electronics and programming lesson every month in class. Again, go to www.mycreationcrate.com to see their curriculum of projects.
Today's podcast is by Sam Nolf. It's the second one that we've done in the series where we've used guest hosts for the podcast, and I've been really pleased with the submissions that we've gotten so far. Sam has been working in education since graduating from Queen's University in 2003. He is a teacher and school chairperson in the Toronto District School Board. Sam is the co-chair of the ICT Inquiry Committee and is an inquiry instructional leader for beginning teachers in the Toronto District School Board. He has spoken domestically and internationally on inquiry instruction and developed and published the Inquiry Framework tool to assist teachers with implementing this innovative teaching practice. I hope you enjoy today's podcast with Sam.
An ordinary school day, ordinary students, in an ordinary time.
What? The 21st century is anything but ordinary.
The philosopher and education reformer John Dewey famously said, "If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow." That couldn't be more true. My name is Sam Nolf, teacher with the Toronto District School Board, and an instructional leader in inquiry instruction and 21st century learning. Well, the changing face of education. Is this an exciting time to be in education?
Cloyce Weaver, Student Achievement Officer with the Ministry of Education, working in student-led collaborative inquiry.
There have been big changes in the last few years. Really exciting trends and initiatives, STEM, STEAM, online learning, the maker movement, problem-based learning, the flipped classroom, knowledge building, technology, apps for education, gamification, student-led learning environments.
Is this an exciting time to be in education? For some, the answer is yes. For some, the answer is no. It's the scariest time in my life.
As professionals and parents, you should try to keep up with the latest research and developments in education. Education tries its best to be responsive to societal needs, and all these initiatives are in response to growing research that shows the development of 21st century skills are lacking in our institutions and classroom practice. The Harvard Graduate School of Education published a study, Pathways to Prosperity, and it maps out the historical trends and relationships between societal, cultural efforts and education. So when we're talking about the 21st century, it's not in a vacuum, but along a very vulnerable social continuum.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because should we be in the position of trying to keep up, or should we be leading? My response would be we should be leading, but I think you might be right. We're just trying to keep up right now. Most teachers will tell you their students are more technologically capable than they are. That's one of the pieces I worry a little bit about the ministry. The ministry is trying to address that, helping those of us who work at the ministry to broaden our understanding of technology and the use of technology. They are supporting us in that. But there's a huge gap, talk about a gap, between what we know and our facility with technology. And show me any 14-year-old or 15-year-old and let me sit down with them, and I will look like a fledgling, and they will help me maneuver. And that's a reality check too. And that's part of that's never happened before. Never in history have kids been smarter in areas than adults.
So there is what's called a 21st century skills gap. You may have heard of this. The Harvard report writes about it, as do many other reports. It's a real thing. What do you think it means? Well, that means the students that leave school are entering the world and the workforce without the skills that will help them be successful. Why are we not talking about this more?
The skills of the 21st century are identified in the ministry, and the ministry is definitely working toward change at the ministry level to align themselves with what is needed. And so you have the ministry moving towards the curriculum pieces being focused in big ideas rather than isolated little specific expectations, which I find interesting, especially as we now know about Finland moving their curriculum from subject to topic. We're not there. It will be interesting to see if we start to mirror that, because it would appear that we're sort of on a path in that direction.
Hi, I'm Dave Levitt. I am a learning coach with the Toronto District School Board.
Dave, why are we shifting to the big ideas and not focusing on the specifics anymore?
That's a great question, but I don't think, I'm going to take that from a second point of view, and I don't think that that's actually true. I think we need to focus on specifics and big ideas, because it's not just big ideas or specifics that we focus on, but the big idea as a way to build an understanding of the connections between various specific expectations.
So, Dave, then how do you reimagine curriculum design? What does that look like to you?
Well, building on what I just said about the idea of big ideas as a way to understand curricular connections, I think the other way we want to do it is to build those interconnections between not only strands, so the expectations between strands and the big idea that connects them within a subject, but even taking subject and big ideas and what's the through line between those various subjects. Social studies and science, we know that they don't live in isolation, so what's the connection between the two of them? How does language filter through that? So I'm thinking along the line of what's the through line of learning, and how many different ways can I connect the two together? The big way that you can do that, of course, is through the inquiry model and inquiry process, because then it's literally driven by interest and student investigation, and through that we pull in all kinds of expectations.
Many educational institutions and ministries and government organizations are investigating this trend, and they're trying to shift, which is why we're seeing these ideas around design thinking and knowledge building and problem-based learning and student-organized learning environments. These current initiatives are best practices for teachers, and they highlight an effort to transform education to better prepare students for the 21st century, and therefore improving their chances for success. So in education, there's a real shift from hard skills that some of us adults grew up with, most of us adults grew up with, to soft skills that are becoming more and more important in today's society. Do you know what I mean by those? So hard skills are understood as specific knowledge or abilities that are teachable and measurable, like a math algorithm, spelling and grammar, or to follow a science procedure. The soft skills are attributes, behaviors, learning traits that are generally less tangible to measure, like collaboration, resiliency, critical thinking, communication, leadership, and so on. So what's the thing? What bridges this skills gap? And what does it look like in the classroom and at home? Well, there are many conversations happening, and they have a lot in common. Keep in mind, Marzano said in 2011, models, strategies, frameworks, and so on are only tools that can be used at different times with varying levels of effectiveness. And the Literacy and Numeracy Secretariat here in Ontario wrote that it's understanding the purpose for which we are using a particular approach that we need to be sensitive to. So one of the developing dialogues and classroom experiments or initiatives on student learning is around inquiry, authentic inquiry investigations. Built on a constructivist foundation, inquiry is a teaching practice that facilitates students creating their own meaning and understanding of the world. It's a student-organized learning environment where hard and soft skills are developed through a process of research, questioning, and design. Now, how? How do you do that? Practically, what does it look like in the school, in the classroom? What's the student learning trajectory and the classroom management? What does curriculum look like? What does lesson planning look like? What's the physical space look like? There are lots of questions.
Carrie Haynes, the principal of North Bendale Junior Public School in Scarborough, Ontario, in the Toronto District School Board.
At the institutional level or school level, what does this look like?
Some of the considerations that North Bendale has put in place for inquiry instruction centers around timetabling. We didn't want to take away the opportunities from the teachers to be able to integrate those subject areas into their teaching. Another consideration we had was the physical spaces. When we think of 21st century teaching strategies and we look at our buildings, there isn't a match. They're not congruent. So we need to find unique ways of engaging students and having them take ownership in creating their learning space. So we took a look at what might a 21st century space look like, and we did some classroom designs and brainstorming around that. In addition, a part of the inquiry journey or 21st century learning journey we had here at North Bendale involved co-teaching, focusing on small group instruction. So what are the strategies that the students need? How can I scaffold their learning to make sure that they are still involved in this inquiry process? And then tying it to the curriculum. A lot of professional development is required when this happens because this is a giant leap from where a lot of my teaching staff had been educated in the early 90s and late 80s.
Teachers are working at designing learning environments and experiences that encourage growth in 21st century skills. Collaborative projects and open-ended problems, rich tasks are nothing new for students, but the learning goals and assessment practices have shifted a bit for teachers. Traditionally, teachers have been driven by product, something tangible to evaluate. We have expanded our assessment to include observation, student conferencing, dialoguing. This allows the process, the thinking, and the reasoning to be highlighted, as much as the end product, if there is one. And in order for this triangle of assessment to function, small group instruction needs to exist in all content areas as classroom management practice.
In terms of the school, the response from the teachers has been extremely positive. I feel that we've evoked a community of learners instead of individual teachers working on their own long-range plans. We now work together as to what are the big ideas that we need to cover from our curriculum and how can we scaffold that from grade to grade. I think that, as I mentioned, this is something that needs to be continually worked on and revisited. Our cycle of learning here at North Bendale takes a very specific process. We come together as a group of learners for a half a day a month, and that's followed up by co-planning with our learning coach and then co-teaching. And that creates a cycle of accountability that needs to keep the momentum pushing forward.
And at the back end, there's still a requirement for assessment and feedback to ensure skill development and student success. So teachers observe, they look for, they prompt with questions, and they record anecdotal observations. There's digital documentation, question and answering sessions, the thinking and reasoning. This shift in documenting process and critical thinking is equally as valid a tool to demonstrate student understanding as any other product-oriented task.
We found that there were barriers for parents in the community, and those barriers centered around pre-existing beliefs as to what education is. A lot of our community felt that if my child knows their times tables, if they know their alphabet, they can spell, they're at a high reading level, that this equals learning and success. We know that with the 21st century learning gap, that's actually not what makes a student successful in society. They need to be able to answer those higher level questions, those critical thinking skills, and to educate the parents on what this looks like, what this feels like, is a process. So we've had to be involved in having those courageous conversations with our parents, in doing some important PD for the parents around what this looks like, and providing them with constant reminders and resources that homework may look different. You might be involved in your child's learning journey. There may be a Google Doc or show that your child is working on.
And what has the response been?
So the response for parents, I'll talk about parents, has been mixed. It has been a journey. You need to keep at it. You need to keep having those conversations, keep focused. When it comes to assessment points in the school year, parents' first go-to is looking at the marks on the report card. The learning skills, the front page of that report card is what, our staff feels is the most valuable tool to assess kids in their learning. However, parents have been trained to just look directly at that mark. Having those conversations about what those marks mean, what that learning looks like, and has been very important. But I think we still have places to go for that.
Our teacher makes these types of activities so he could assess us on how we cooperate with each other. And what we learn is that we should listen to everybody's voice and work as a team.
It's important to learn cooperation skills because when you're older, you're probably going to get a job that involves talking to other people and working with them. So learning cooperation skills from a young age can make it easier to work and talk with other people.
So practically, here's what it looks like in my classroom. This is what students do during an inquiry investigation. They choose a topic based on interest, build their background knowledge through research, make cultural and personal connections to build empathy and understanding. They develop questions that demonstrate their understanding and lead to action. They propose interventions that fulfill a need, design, create, share, reflect, and improve. And this process we repeat. And we've found that teachers have difficulty explicitly teaching some of the learning skills. So all of this is anchored in a framework. I've used some cooperative games, developed some observational charts, some conferencing questions, some look-fors, and some next steps to help students develop these skills and are scaffolded over time. So, for example, we might start out with a challenge or an investigation that requires a lot of teamwork and communication building. We might then try a challenge that requires cooperation and organization. And we might finish the scaffold with a challenge where leadership skills and responsibility are highlighted. And all the while, we're reframing the notion of failure as resiliency.
We are probably experiencing a major change in the way that education is going to be delivered. There is a huge paradigm shift for teachers from teacher at the front of the room delivering content to teacher as facilitator and helping students explore learning that they're interested in, and also that will meet, because there are some things we need to know, even in the 21st century.
These principles are embedded in 21st century instructional models, and hopefully I've given you something concrete to hold on to. You'll find your own strengths and direction as a teacher, as an administrator, or a parent. But the 21st century classroom is where a student-directed investigation harnesses the child's innate curiosity for better engagement and improved retention. Schooling becomes more relevant and rigorous while developing skills and relationships for sustained lifelong learning. Students are more engaged because they are working on topics of interest rather than prescriptive teacher-led content delivery. And they retain more of their learning because it's self-generated and meaningful. In a nutshell, curious minds learn more. Thank you very much for your time today. If you care to contact me with some questions or comments, I can be reached at samuel.nulf@tdsb.on.ca. Bye-bye now.
That'll do it for today's podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and if you didn't hate it, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening, and share it on social media wherever you feel comfortable. Speaking of social media, you can find us in all the normal places like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and please share us on those places as well. And don't forget about TeachThought Professional Development. You can find us there at teachthought.com/PD.
Teaching STEM education can be difficult as a teacher if you don't have any experience in electronics or programming. That is why a company called Creation Crate has created a subscription project curriculum that delivers new tech projects to teachers every single month. The best part is that there's a progression in the projects so that they get more challenging each month. Using promo code TEACHTHOUGHT, you can get 10% off your first project by going to mycreationcrate.com. Again, that's www.mycreationcrate.com for 10% off using promo code TEACHTHOUGHT.